No matter what business you're in, at some point you'll likely need to innovate. Giving up completely on the old business is usually next to impossible. It's where your competitive advantage lies, and why would you give up all the years of expertise that you've built? But jumping completely into a new business is something that generally takes a lot of time, and it's going to need to grow in order to be successful, and usually we're talking about years. There's a three-step process in this model that was built. The first is all about repositioning the legacy business so that it can stand on its own and remain profitable. The second is about building future business plans. And the third is about creating exchange teams to make both transitions successful. So what does that look like? Well, let's take Transformation A first, which is repositioning the legacy business. This is where you have to ask yourself the question of, what do we do that our customers still want? And you can't get there solely by subtraction. Sure, cuts are a reality you'll have to deal with, and that's part of this process. Let me give you the example of the Deseret News. Deseret News is a newspaper based in Salt Lake City. It's a print newspaper. Print has been in decline for years and years. Here's the way that they managed to get through this transition using this model. Transformation A for the Deseret News, they realized that they needed to stop focusing on commodity news and instead focus on the 6 areas of editorial content that their audience cared most about, which were family, faith, education, care for the poor, financial responsibility, and media's influence on values. They also identified a broader market for their print product outside of the Salt Lake City area. There was a weekly newsletter that they printed in addition to their daily newspaper, which garnered a huge following. And they also managed to cut costs in the non-core areas of their business. And this was painful. This involved massive staff layoffs, but they did it strategically, where they used a cost basis for the stories that were being produced, cut out the commodity news, and focused on the above editorial keys, which I just talked about. The results for them were that they created the fastest growing print newspaper in just the last couple of years. Print, be as it may, is not the end-all be-all for the Deseret News, and they realized that. They knew that they needed to build a new business plan and a new business to carry them into the future. This is where they developed Deseret Digital. And Deseret Digital was answering the question for them, what unmet needs do customers have in today's environment? Now, this business is going to take a long time to be the principal moneymaker for your company, usually 10 years or more. And here's the way that Deseret Digital went about building this business. Number 1, they maintained a small number of staff writers. 2, they got the majority of their content by crowdsourcing it and using outside contributors. 3, they're still going to focus on those same 6 areas of editorial content that I spoke about on the Deseret News side. And 4, they create original content and digital site traffic for affiliate sites. For instance, they created the site OK.com, which was a parent television guide about safe programs for their kids, or a family-friendly Groupon-like site for family-friendly deals. These were big money makers for Deseret Digital as it began to mature. Step 3 is creating the capabilities exchange. Now, this is where it gets complicated, and this is where a lot of organizations fall down. So it's really important that you do this in a 5-step process. Number 1, you have to establish leadership, and this has to happen at the largest rungs of the organization. It's usually the CEO who knows this is the path that they need to be on. Then there needs to be one single leader responsible for each of the transformations: A, the old business, and transformation B, which is the new business. Number 2, you have to identify the resources the two organizations can or need to share. In the case of Deseret News and Deseret Digital, this was all about the Deseret Digital product leveraging the mass readership of the print edition and vice versa, where they're sharing audiences. 3, you have to create exchange teams. These are generally small teams that are established by leadership in both organizations. They can come and go as needed. For the case of Deseret Digital and Deseret News, they shared content teams. Number 4, you have to protect boundaries. And this means that you have to have separate accounting, including shared resources when one side is borrowing resources from the other. So when Deseret News is borrowing a Deseret Digital story, it actually has to pay the Deseret Digital side for the stories that it's going to use. This is really important so that when disagreements arise, that it's settled at the very, very top. But it's also important so you understand which business lines are growing and where challenges are arising. And last but not least, scale up and promote the new business. Even though the old business should remain profitable on its own for the foreseeable future, it's important that the top leadership in the organization understands that the new business is where the future is and invests in it properly. I'll give you one more quick takeaway here as we wrap things up. Something to think about and why your business likely needs to innovate. Corporate lifespans of the S&P 500 over the last 60 years or so. Well, in 1958, the average company in the S&P 500 was in existence for 61 years. In 1980, that lifespan is 25 years, and today it's only 18. So innovation, it's essential, and your company's going to need to do it. But knowing what and how to innovate, those are the keys to success. So when you think about where you are today and where you want to go tomorrow, make sure that you're paying attention to the capabilities, skills, capacity, business context, and the structure that you have in order to get there.